Hey guys, Laura Whitmore here with Strategic Test Prep. Should you take the digital SAT? What is the deal with the digital SAT? In this video, I'm going to cover the differences between the digital SAT and the paper SAT and give my recommendations for you as to how you should proceed. All right, let's start with what is the digital SAT? So the digital SAT is a computer-based test and it's adaptive. What that means is the test adapts to your skill level. So typically, a section will start with a medium difficulty question. And then if you get it wrong, the next question will be easier than the last question. If you get it right, the next question will be harder than the last question. So because of this adaptive testing, studies have shown that you can get the same score as accurate as a paper test with less questions and in less time. So that is one advantage to the adaptive testing is it's shorter and you can get the same score. So the digital SAT is roughly a 2-hour test versus the paper version, which is 3.5 hours. However, there are some downsides to adaptive testing, one of which is theoretically you're not supposed to be allowed to go back and review questions you've already answered. And then secondly, there are some hacks and students have figured out if they get a couple of the first questions wrong or a few of the first questions wrong, it makes it an easier test and then they can still get a really good score. So there you go. That is what adaptive testing is in a nutshell. Okay, so when do you have to take the digital SAT? If you're an international student, it's right around the corner. Starting in 2023, you will no longer be offered the paper test and the SAT will go completely digital for you. If you are in the US, the SAT paper version will still be offered through 2023, and you will have to take the digital version in 2024. So keep those things in mind because at the end of this video, I'm going to give you some recommendations, and my recommendations are going to be based off of those facts. All right, so I checked out a digital SAT this week myself to see what it was like. Just a heads up, you have to download an app. It's called Blue Book Exams. It's owned by College Board, and in the app, you have 4 official adaptive practice tests to try. So I tried one out, and it's structured with 4 different modules. So 1 and 2 are a reading and writing section. And then modules 3 and 4 are math sections. So that's a big difference is that the reading and writing are combined into one, whereas before there was a reading section separate and a writing section separate. What are some of the other differences between the digital and the paper test? Well, the reading is a big change where instead of reading an entire passage, you're just reading like a snippet of lines. So it could be anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6 lines at a time. There are also questions on poetry now. So I saw some questions where they gave like a Shakespeare poem and then you had to pick extra lines to fit with the poem or you had to decipher the poem's meaning. There's also a new type of question called students' notes where they list a bunch of bullet points and say that a student took notes and these were the important aspects of what they were taking notes on. And then you have to come up with like the general theme or the main idea based on the notes that you read. I also noticed that there's way more transition questions now than there were before. When I started the second section of the English modules, there were like 8 transition questions in a row. So those are the words that start a sentence like however, therefore, and nevertheless. I also noticed there are a ton more words and context questions where you have to pick the best word to go in the blank. And I think that this is because now that we're not reading entire passages, there's going to be less main idea questions. How can we come up with the main idea of a passage when we don't even have the entire passage as a whole to go off of? Big difference on the math. On the digital version, you can use a calculator throughout the math sections. They do provide a digital calculator on screen from Desmos. However, I would recommend that you use your own calculator because you're used to your own calculator and the Desmos one would take a while to get used to. Honestly, I've used Desmos and I've used GeoGebra before, but I still had a difficult time working with the calculator on the screen. You know, going through the math modules, I noticed that the concepts are pretty similar to the paper test. So as far as what they're testing, I do not think that that's going to change much. But what I anticipate is a lot of the numbers probably won't divide evenly. I don't think that we'll get as many integer answer choices now because you can use a calculator throughout. So I even noticed with like the systems of equations problems, there are more decimals with the coefficients and just numbers that aren't really nice to work with, which is going to make it a little bit more difficult to assess whether or not you got the right answer. Because on section 3, I would tell my students on fill-ins that they should expect to get like an easy fraction or a whole number. And now we can't rely on that if we have a calculator the whole time. All right, now it's time for me to complain a little bit. I've been used to the paper test since I started tutoring in 2007. And I actually took a paper test before that when I was in high school. These are the things I do not like about the digital SAT. Okay, starting with the reading and the writing. I do not like that they just give you snippets of passages. Now that I don't have the context and I don't know what I'm reading about, it's super boring to me because I'm not learning anything. I'm just like thrown into the middle of a few sentences and I just have to pick the right answer. I feel like some of the passages on the reading section were actually really interesting and I learned a lot from them. And now that aspect of it is being taken away, which kind of bothers me because I feel like the enjoyment of reading is to learn something or get something out of it. And now it really feels just like a test. Like I'm not really enjoying the reading part at all. The other thing with the reading and writing that I don't like is that they're combined into one section. So it's taking me a little bit to figure out if I'm on a reading question or a writing question. And I think that that's going to come with time, but it's just like taking my brain a little bit to figure out what exactly I'm supposed to be doing on each question. I also don't like that it's adaptive because I feel like it's going to be more difficult to prep on your own when it's adaptive because let's say you get a question wrong. How do you know the next question to give yourself? I still think that the paper tests are going to be useful to practice out of. I noticed that a lot of the concepts are the same and the types of questions are the same. So I would still recommend using paper tests, but it's just going to be harder to replicate that adaptive environment where you know you should give yourself a harder question next. You know you should give yourself an easier question next. And there's only 4 practice tests to go off of right now. So unlike the paper test where you have like 20, 30, 40 tests to choose from the book and also the ones that have been released through QAS reports, this is just a very limited pool of questions that you can use. With the math, I have to say, I don't like that you can't mark up the charts and graphs right on the screen. A thing that I really like about the paper test is if they give me a graph and they ask me to find out, what my Y value is when X is 200, I can just easily go up to the line and then go over. I can circle things, I can draw things in, I can draw in additional shapes. And on the digital test, I can't do that. This is also kind of nitpicky, and maybe I'm getting old. I don't know. You guys will have to let me know if you agree with this or not. But my eyes hurt after a while, after looking at the screen for so long. It's just like I feel like I need those blue light glasses when I'm taking a test like this. Also, the last thing I will say that I really, really do not like is there's a clock at the top of the screen at all times counting down. And it actually adds to my anxiety and it makes me a little bit more preoccupied with time than I would be on the paper test. Honestly, when I take a paper test, I don't even look at the clock at all. And so I just don't like that it's right in my face like that, reminding me that I'm like running out of time. I also don't like that when you use the practice test in the Blue Book exams app, they don't provide answer explanations. On the paper test, you can have access to answer explanations if you don't know what you did wrong. And I think that that's a huge limitation for students when they're trying to learn and get better, not understanding why they got a question incorrect. The last thing I'm going to say is I have a hard time grasping how this is truly an adaptive test because they do have a feature where you can flag each question that you want to go back to and review later on. And I'm not really sure how you're able to change your answers to questions when you lock in an answer and then it determines the next question that you're going to get. So that's kind of an interesting feature to me and doesn't really make sense. It's not quite a true adaptive test for that reason. So what is my recommendation? What should you do if you're an international student or even a US student? So here's what I would say. If you're an international student, sign up for the December 3rd test and get a paper score in. You might just naturally be better at the paper test. You might be like me and prefer the paper version more. So I have an online course that can prep you and get you ready for the paper test. I will link it in the description below and right up above me right now. I also would say that you could take the digital test when it comes out. I'm not trying to discourage anybody from taking the digital test. Maybe you do better with the digital test, but I think it'll be important for you to hedge your bets, have all your options open, have a paper score and then a digital score, and then you can submit the one that is stronger that you like better. I would also recommend if you really, really don't like the digital version to take the ACT because it's still a paper test at this time. So the ACT score weighs just as well as the SAT score. Colleges look at those equally. And maybe you'll do better on the ACT. I mean, it's a good idea to take both tests anyways and then send in your stronger score. If you're a US student and you're a sophomore, I would say take the paper test this coming year and prep right away. You want to take advantage of the resources that are out there in the paper version before it goes away completely. Right now, from my understanding, a couple students have told me that the College Board is offering the digital test for free. It's obvious why they're doing that, though. They need you as a guinea pig. They want to see if this test is working. They have to test the questions because it's an adaptive test before they can release it. So they're basically using you, I hate to say it, and your score isn't going to count. So I think it's a waste of time. You have practice tests through the Blue Book exam. Why put yourself through going into a test center and doing a practice test just because it's free? I would probably advise against that. All right, guys, a lot to think about moving forward. I mean, the good news is the digital test is shorter, so that's something to look forward to. I think it's going to be an adjustment for everybody. I know I'm already right to work on figuring out how to best teach this digital test to all my students. And yeah, please comment below. Let me know what you think about the digital SAT. I would love to hear it. If you liked this video and you found it helpful, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe buttons below, and I will see you guys again soon.